What's up, man?
Hey, how we doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing well, doing well.
How's things down that way?
They're hot.
Hot. Yeah, we've been outside of Friday. We've been hot. Practices have been warm. With our football
Really?
team, and Thursday we couldn't play because of some lightning and stuff. So
Yeah.
that was loads of fun. But just kind of want to, I'm trying to get some coaches on and get to chatting, one for myself, one to learn, and from some of the guys that I look up to or watch a lot.
Sure.
We obviously have been following each other for a little bit, and we're in the same, I guess, breakout group at the NHSCA and didn't realize it until
Right.
afterwards. Um,
Right.
so, um, but I, wanted to first, once you introduce yourself, kind of who you are, what you do, and kind of how you got to where you're at now.
Sure. So, my name's Nick Brattain. I'm the high performance coach for Isidore Newman School here in New Orleans. Also own Bratton Sports Performance. I originally started out in Indianapolis. I went to the University of Indianapolis, majored in exercise science, physical therapy. I was a track athlete there, ran the 200, 400. Upon graduation, I took an internship with Indiana University Health, a hospital organization up there. Ended up, after that internship, taking a position with them. I was there for 4 or 5 years, and at the end, I was basically the team leader, so I ran the sports performance department there. Back in, I believe it was September of 2014, I took a position personally with Eric Gordon. Came down here, really just trained him and focused on his training. Throughout my years with him, I began to work with other individuals on the team. And so did that for the 14, 15, 15, 16 season. Had the opportunity to basically join him and go to Houston. At that point, I decided that I was going to stay here in New Orleans, open my facility, as well as started working with some of the Newman groups.
Okay. Um, Kind of the funny part about our I guess connection is I think as I was leaving, it sounds like you were coming in. I left. I was at
Oh,
University
really?
of New Orleans with Oshner from 2012 to 2013 or something like that. So we
Yeah.
kind of missed each other. I was
Yeah. Yeah.
one of the athletic trainers down there. So um, I get, well, since you're in New Orleans and we both been there. What part of town is your gym there? Um, and
So the
Go ahead.
gym itself is kind of in the River Ridge, Harahan area.
Okay.
I live up in Metairie, and then obviously Newman is down in Uptown. So I'm kind of driving all over the place throughout the day.
Okay. How does that work for you with your facility and then with Newman? Are you at Newman for most of the day and then in the afternoon out at the facility? How does that work for you?
Yeah, so my daily schedule looks something like this. I will open up the facility at 6 a.m. I will do a group at 6 and at 7. Then I go into Newman. I'm at Newman basically all day long from 8 to 5. When I get done there, then I go back out to the facility and I train at the facility from usually about 5:30 till 9 o'clock at night. And I'll do that Monday through Friday.
Wow. Okay. So your wife is understanding for sure.
My wife is great. Yes, my
Um,
wife.
so give me give me the dynamics of training with Eric Gordon there. I mean, that's an interesting going from, kind of dealing with a lot of people for an hour, maybe 2 hours. I
Right.
mean, it sounds like you were directly Eric Gordon. I mean, it was Eric Gordon and maybe a few others. So how was that different, or how did that help you develop as a coach?
Yeah, it was the nice thing is I had known Eric for a while before that. And so he and I were good friends. We knew kind of what each other was like, and I knew what he was looking for. Oops, excuse me. Um, and so, it was an easy transition for us, when I came down here. And so, we very much had a personal relationship, which made it easy. And it was, you're right. It was very different. I'm used to working with either people one-on-one for an hour or two a week, or I'm used to working in large group settings. And so when I started doing that, it gave me the opportunity to really get specific, and to try some things that I hadn't done in the past, to really break down a lot of his movements. It was the first time that I was actually able to take one person and kind of break down their film and look at their movement specifically, and just see where we wanted to go from there. It was also an opportunity to really use someone else's feedback in my programming and in our design of everything. And so, it was nice from that standpoint, especially at that level. Those guys have been training for so long. They have an idea of what they like, what they don't like, what they feel like they get the most out of. And so, that was nice too, to be able to kind of collaborate with an athlete, especially an athlete who had been with many trainers, many coaches, and honestly, all the people that he had worked with in the past were very open with me, and were able to say, listen, we've done this in the past. I think it worked well. He didn't like it, or vice versa. And so, again, it was kind of a deep dive into just really getting specific. Also, he had dealt with a number of injuries. And so that was one of the reasons that I came on with him. He had a number of knee and ankle issues. And so my job was to really help him to stay healthy and get through an entire season as he came up on a contract year.
Okay. I was going to ask, because how far along into his career was he when you came on with him?
Let's see. So he went into the league in 2008. I started with him in 2014. So
He's been there
it was
6-7
his
years.
7th year.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah.
So the one thing about him that a lot of people have to keep in mind and that they forget is that he started in the NBA at 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So, he's still very young. He's still only 28, 29 years old and has a number of years left. But like any of these guys at that level, they just deal with a lot of issues. You play 100 games a year when you take into account the preseason, the postseason. There's just a lot that they've got to go through.
Now, do you still work with him in the off season, or is he you've helped him move on to somebody else?
Yeah, he was originally drafted by the Clippers.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was with them for 4 years before he was traded down in New Orleans. And so he still maintains his home out there. So most of the time he does all his off-season training in Los Angeles.
Okay. I wondered if y'all had kept that going or how that worked for you.
Yeah, we still keep in touch on a weekly basis and stay in contact with each other. And if he's got questions on anything or needs anything, I'm always a resource for him. But for the most part, he handles a lot of his stuff now.
Okay. Now, you've obviously transitioned to your own facility, and then obviously with the high school athlete. What were some of the maybe seeing a guy at that level and then seeing the high school? Obviously, there's some massive differences. But what would you say maybe are like the top 2 or 3 that you saw that separates kind of the cream of the crop in terms of maybe their movement or their commitment, whatever it may be, to say the guys, and you see some high level kids there at Newman as well.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously Peyton Manning's old school, and there's some football history there. And what have you seen kind of been the differences between working with a pro guy like that and then maybe some of the high school kids that you see?
Well, obviously there's a major difference from the standpoint of when you have that large of a group of athletes, you have a wide range. When you talk about some of the best at the high school level and professional athletes, I think what makes the pro athletes is their ability to compensate. I've worked with a number of NBA guys at this point, and there are a number of guys that I've worked with that they really don't do anything exceptional. When it comes to being in the weight room or even being on the court. Yeah, they're very skilled, obviously. But it's not like you're going to look at their numbers and say, wow, I can tell that they're a pro athlete. It's when they get out there, they're able to master their skill. They're able to if they may not be extremely efficient in one movement pattern, they're able to create another one, or create tension within the body that gives them an advantage over others. So, one, it's their ability to compensate, and two, I think that commitment levels are varying. Even at the highest level, I can't say that every single one of the athletes that I've worked with is extremely committed. I know an individual that at the beginning of his career, all he ate was cereal. He basically had to get drug out of bed every day. He never wanted to come to training. I mean, it was like pulling teeth every time we got something done. And so, that's something that you're going to see at all levels. So, as far as the big differences, it's their ability to basically find their most efficient patterns and use those. And honestly, their ability to, I think recover is the wrong word, but their ability to express repeated bouts of max effort, and do it over and over and over again, and really not have that wear and tear, and not break down. And obviously once they get a little older and they get into the NBA, that's a little different. But they're just able to handle things that a lot of the general population can't handle.
Yeah, it's kind of the idea of being talented just in spite of their weight room. You see the guys that are just freaks, but you get them in the weight room, it's like, oh my goodness, like you can't move, you can't do a squat, but it doesn't matter. It's like Kevin Durant. You can't teach 7 feet that can shoot, so who cares if he can bench 185 at the combine, and
Right.
at 19. I mean, there's very few high school kids right now that can do that. And I think, like you said, a lot of people forget with these talented players, so many of them are so young getting into the NBA. Like Eric
Yeah.
was 19, and Kevin Durant or what's the other one down there, Anthony Davis. They're all 19. Like they haven't even hit
Right.
their full total development, and you see them as they take off. Like Kevin Durant where he is
Right.
now, and Anthony Davis where he is now in terms of his physicality. It's where he is, where he was as a rookie. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of people just get bogged down in that, and they see these NFL guys that are freaks in the weight room,
Right.
and think that basketball players should be the same way to be able to perform it. It's just not the same. It's two different sports.
Yeah.
And you can't. It's like comparing apples to oranges.
Right. Right. And I think that it's important to also point out that there are some guys that can do that, but there are guys that are on the other side of that as well. There are some guys that, like Kevin Durant, who he probably doesn't spend the majority of his time in the weight room and doing that type of work. However, there are guys on the other side like Victor Oladipo. The stuff that he does in the off season is incredible, and the way that he prepares himself, and we've seen over the last couple of years how he performed when maybe his preparation wasn't as good, and now over the last 2 years, as he's been doing his work down in Miami and the things that he's been doing, I mean, he's extremely prepared, and he has been really just showing out and showing people what he can really do.
Do you think that acceptance of strength and conditioning and some of those guys, like say like an Eric Gordon or Victor Oladipo, maybe they didn't have the program coming in, maybe in high school or in college, that necessarily stressed that, or they didn't focus on it. But once they got to the NBA, do you think it was like, I've got to do something extra? Or do you think it's just kind of, they see everybody else and they kind of just fall in line? I mean, what do you think kind of turns that switch for some of those guys?
I think it's a little bit of everything. I'll say that one reason why Eric was so adamant about picking me up back in 2014 was he had the same agent as Kobe Bryant. And Kobe had his own guy, and Kobe's guy was with him all the time. And so his agent was one of the advocates saying, listen, you need this. You need to have somebody who's with you all the time, someone who is dedicated to just you. And so, I think that there are a couple different forces that are acting on them. And when they get to that level, they see what everybody else is doing, and they have the opportunity to say, okay, I'm either going to follow this individual and I'm going to become very dedicated. I'm going to be similar to like a LeBron James, who spends $1.5 million on recovery or on his body every year, or I'm going to go the other route and I'm going to enjoy my money and I'm going to, basically not worry about that stuff because I got to this point doing what I was doing and I don't need to do anything more. And so, not that one is good or the other is, but, they just tend to go, one way or the other.
Okay. And how does that, because I know each team has their own staff, how did that relationship or how did you all work together? I mean, how did that dynamic go about between like a
Yeah.
personal trainer and then the team strength and conditioning staff?
Right. So I tried to be very aware of that when I came down here and realized that it was definitely a person, intimate setting, something that they don't necessarily want other people coming in all the time. I tried to be very upfront, but also very cautious as I met those individuals. They had two different head strength coaches when I came down here for the 14-15 season and one 15-16 season. And so, luckily they were both very open to me. The strength coach for the 15-16 season was the assistant the previous year. And so I already had a pretty good relationship with him, and he and I had good communication. Now I would not go in when the rest of the team was in. I would respect his space and his privacy from that standpoint. I wasn't looking to step on anybody's toes, but we would do our work whenever we needed to do our work. Whenever he and I interacted, it was very cordial. We had plenty of conversations going back and forth as far as, what I felt like was going well with Eric, things that he could implement, say if I wasn't traveling with the team. And so, we tried to work very closely with one another because obviously, we both want this individual to do well. We both want him to succeed. And so it was really a very good relationship.
Nice. Now, obviously you're at Newman High School. Can you give us or give me I've heard kind of how it happened for you in other podcasts and stuff. Just give a breakdown of how you got there, how that occurred. And then is that something, and I'm trying to think, I don't think when I was there that I saw a lot of this is having a strength coach in the high schools down there. Obviously the public schools are not necessarily, they weren't great, which is where there's a lot of a lot of private schools. Is a lot of the schools starting to get the strength coach? What's going on down there in terms of the culture of, physical prep, I guess?
Yeah. So as far as how the position came about, I opened my facility first and I had a number of athletes that I was training, but obviously now that I had much more time within the day and I had overhead that I had to cover, my biggest thing was how am I going to get more exposure to athletes? How am I going to basically expand this brand? And so what I did is I reached out to every single athletic director within 50 miles of the facility. Basically presented to them who I was, what I had been doing, what my program, my philosophy looks like. And I asked them if I could come out and do something for free, teach a free speed clinic, teach a free strength session, give them a free program for 3 weeks. If there's, just some way to give them my service. And so, ironically, or in reality, Newman was the only school that reached back out. And so, the athletic director reached out to me and he said, listen, I'm not looking for anything free, but we are trying to put a program together. We have worked with private guys in the past. We've brought individuals in. It's never really worked out the way that we wanted it to work out. We're going to give this thing one shot. And so, we would love for you to basically throw your hat in the ring here and give it a chance. So, we went back and forth through that, and I started in the summer of 2016 with the program and have built it since then. So as far as the climate of strength conditioning here in New Orleans, or really within Louisiana as a whole, I'm the state director for high school strength conditioning for the NHSSCA, and so I try to stay in contact with a lot of the strength coaches here in the state. and have a little bit of a pulse on what's going on and who is doing what. And like you said, there's not a lot of schools that have a full-time person who that's all they do. Not someone who's a football coach, not someone who coaches another sport, but all they do is strength conditioning. In Louisiana itself, we have 404 high schools, and I believe that there are only 23 or 24 schools that have a full-time person. That's all they do. Now, there are a number of schools that have somebody in that position, but their experience within it, the teams that they work with, that varies from school to school. It's definitely something coming from Indiana. Louisiana is definitely behind the times. When I was in Indy, like I said, I worked for a hospital organization. We were the healthcare providers for a number of high schools, and every single school that we worked with had a full-time person in that position. And just about every school that was within 20 miles of us had somebody in that position, whether they were ours or someone else's. So when I came down here and I realized the situation that they were in, it was very evident to me that it was just 10, 15 years behind, and they're just trying to play catch up at this point.
Yeah, that was something interesting when I went up to the Indianapolis for the conference. I stayed with Justin Ochoa, who is a personal trainer, strength coach up in that Indianapolis area. And that's something he said, is that most of schools, and then you look as you start getting into the conference, how many of the guys were from the area, guys like Adam Lane, and then, obviously, what's his name over there at Noblesville, Brian Clark,
Right.
These massive programs, and even in some of the like inner city schools have, somebody there that has had his experience or has a background in it.
Yeah.
And that was huge.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm coming from Georgia where the private schools have a full-time guy, that's all they do. Whereas you don't see it necessarily in the public. Now I've heard of a couple that have started to do that, but they're usually your 6 or 7A schools that are starting to have that at your higher level. But you think about the talent pool that's in New Orleans or in Louisiana, period.
Right.
And good God, could you imagine if they had somebody that was truly developing them, how much better it could be? You'd have some huge powerhouses that are even greater than they already are.
And honestly, I think that's one of the reasons why strength conditioning is so far behind, because there is so much talent here. I don't think that it's something that they've had to rely on for a long period of time. And so, now they're catching up. They're realizing that a lot of other schools, a lot of other states are using this, implementing this. If you look at our neighbors, Florida and Texas, it's all over the place. They've got coaches everywhere. And so if we decide that we're going to compete out of state, this is who we have to compete against. And so, like I said, it's just kind of playing catch up at this point.
Yeah, for sure. So what were some of the biggest challenges in building your program there at Newman?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges is always going to be buy-in. Buy-in with your athletic director, buy-in with your coaches, buy-in with your athletes. And so, just trying to get over that. Trust, and trust both ways. Trust for me, of the athletes, trust of the athletes for me. And so, just trying to build those up. In year one, that's absolutely what I'm focused on is just getting them to be sold out for the program. You and I both know that you can have the best program out there, but if no one believes in it, then it means nothing. And on the flip side, you can have a terrible program, but if everybody thinks the world of it, they're going to get something out of it. And so, it's building that trust and getting them to understand why we're doing what we're doing, what the purpose is, and what my intentions are. Again, like I said, there had been a number of private coaches that had come in and out of there in years past. And so and I'm a private coach as well. I get that. Time is money. And so, you are trying to get from your facility to the school, put in that work, get back to your facility. Whereas, with a full-time person, that individual is there for practice. That individual is there for games. That individual is there throughout the day. I can't tell you the number of athletes that will come through the weight room during the day, and we'll just sit and talk. We'll go over stuff either from class or how practice went the night before or whatever it may be. And so just helping them understand, why I'm there. One of the biggest questions that I got my first year there was, am I going to go back to the NBA? And so, it's always a concern for them. Why are you here? What is, what is your intention? Are you going to leave us in so much time? And so, building that trust. The other tough thing is we are always trying to create or build by working backward. And so, this is where we want to get to. How do we get there? And that's from a cultural standpoint, but also from a programming standpoint. And so, even in year 3, I'm still constantly making these adjustments. I made decisions and I did things in year 1 and 2, even from a culture standpoint, hoping, okay, this is what I want. This is what I want to see out of the athletes. This is the attitude that I expect. So here's how I'm going to get there. Well, it either did or did not work, and so I'm adjusting how we're going through that. But same thing from a programming standpoint. I've thrown things into the program that I used at other schools or with other individuals that I got exactly what I wanted out of. But with this group, I'm getting something different, and so that's part of it. That's part of working with different athletes, different individuals who come from just a different background. And so constantly reverse engineering and adjusting the program and the mindset as we go.
Yeah. And I know there's a few people on here. If y'all have any questions for myself or for Nick, feel free to put them out there. I won't answer them. Looks like M the Wolf is, I guess, maybe one of your athletes. Says, "Go Nicky."
That's actually my little sister. So,
oh,
yeah.
okay. Well, there you go. There you go. Now, you had talked about the buy-in, getting that. I mean, what are some of the big things you did with your kids to get them? Because obviously, coaches can be bought in, and I dealt with some of this where the coach, this past year, I started with our baseball team in the afternoons, and the coach is totally bought in. Whatever you want, you go for it, do what you want to do. But obviously, you get the first year. Freshmen don't have a clue. They just do whatever you tell them. Whereas you get those seniors, and you came in those guys last year. How were you able to get those guys to buy in? Because obviously they see the guys at the top, the guys and girls at the top commit. That makes it even easier for the freshmen or sophomores. That was something I struggled with this year, was getting those seniors in the first year that we had implemented, me working with them, to get them to they were there, but they weren't there. What was some things you did with them to kind of get them, into the program and built into it?
Well, I mean, I think that the buy-in starts with the coach, and it starts with how vocal the coach is about it. So, the first thing that I did is I had multiple meetings with every single coach on staff, just trying to understand where they're at, where they're coming from. Had they been doing any strength training on their own in the past? What was their intent with it? Did it go well? Did it not go well? So trying to understand the history of it before, moving forward. And so that was one reason that I think that I had a lot of buy-in from my coaches. But, I can say that, just about every coach, I think I had one or two that I struggled with, but just about every coach was bought in, but they were all bought into a different level. And I can say that my football coach was absolutely sold out for it. And to the extent that every single practice, we were talking about high performance training. At the end of every single game, we were talking about high performance training, and not me, but him. Whereas I had other coaches on staff that, yes, were completely bought in, but weren't as vocal about it. And you could tell that the athletes were a little more hesitant. So, I think it starts there. The other thing is, it's ironic because we just had all the head coaches and myself just had a leadership retreat yesterday, and we were talking about this generation of athletes, and we were talking about how they have so much access, to information, things on the internet, from training to nutrition. They can, whatever you tell them, they can verify that on their own, and many of them will. And so, one of the big things that I tried to do was to explain exactly why we were doing it, what the intent was, and what I was looking to get out of it. and try and help them understand that, this all had a purpose. And I feel like for a number of athletes, that helped them. But you still had some individuals and a small subset that they wanted to see the effects on the field first. And so they did enough to complete it and to basically say that it had been done. And they were, very, very on board with doing their workouts and being present. But once they got onto the field and they saw what was happening in competition, it was another level of buy-in. It was another level of commitment, of being in more than what they needed to be, of really trying to go out of their way to understand it better themselves and not necessarily just do what was being asked of them.
I like it. I like it. That's kind of the knowing your why, and then sometimes people seeing the results. There's kind of this subset or two different types of people. You may be somebody that you just tell me why I'm doing it, and I'll do it. Or there's a person, I got to see it. I got to see the results before I then go full bore, which is kind of like,
right.
If you go full bore, you'll see even greater. But sometimes they can see, oh, I did this much. If I do this much now and really buy in or really fight for it, then it can be even better. And then you get them, full-fledged into your program.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I was talking with my head coaches about yesterday is just about all of us were collegiate athletes, and just about all of us had the same mindset when it came to training. We were going to do exactly what the coach said, and we were going to do it with everything that we had. Just because they were the coach, they were in that position for a reason. We had to trust them, and at the end of the day, we were all competitors. Well, one thing that we talked about yesterday is not everybody wants to be that. Not every athlete wants to be number one. There are athletes on the team that just want to be on the team to wear the jersey. And there are athletes on the team that just want to be there because they want to be cheerleaders and they want to be supporters of their friends. And there are athletes that go out of their way to make sure that they are number two on the team because they don't want to be the guy taking the shot at the end of the game. But they still want to see a level of success to the extent that, they still get some credit. And so, it's trying to figure out what everybody's why is and trying to figure out what they want their position on the team to be and help them to achieve that. And sometimes, we have to be a little more of a psychologist and help them through those and help them to understand, listen, you can be more or you can have a different role on this team. But for the most part, we're just trying to help them get to where they want to be.
Yeah. And I've talked about some of that, the mental part of it. Let's go to the physical part of how you're coaching. Can you give me some of your philosophies for your programming for your high school athletes or any of your athletes really? But how do you, I guess, for because obviously the high school is so much different than what you may get the ability to do in the private. You can do a little bit more in the private because you got a little more time, whereas in the high school you may not have as much time. What are some of your philosophies there that kind of guide your training?
Yeah, so I'm definitely someone who just sticks with the basics, especially on the front end. So we are, and I know this was a frustrating thing for my athletes in year one. We did a lot of work with kettlebells, and we did a lot of work laying on the ground, and so that was something that they struggled with, and my freshmen every year continue to struggle with. But we're going to get really good at doing the basics. We're going to have really good squat patterns, really good hinging patterns. We're going to know how to brace and get into the right position. We're going to know how to push and pull properly, how our shoulder blades, how our scapula are going to track as we go through pulling and pushing movements, things like that. And so it's learning those basics first, and then basically progressing from there. And so the other thing that I'm trying to do is, as we're learning those basics, begin to build autonomy, begin to teach them, like we've talked about a number of times so far, teach them why we're doing what we're doing, why it's in the program where it is, how to think critically a little bit, so that as we become more specific and as it gets more complex, I can give them that autonomy. So as we're going into year 3 now, I have a new tier or a new level within the program, and it gets very specific. And there are times where I'm going to have one group in there that there may be 4 or 5 different programs going on. You know, I'm going to have my white program for my most basic athletes. I'm going to have my green program for my second year athletes. And then I'm going to have my black program for my third year athletes and the most advanced. And within that black program, you know, these guys are going to be doing all kinds of different movements. You know, they're going to be, I might have somebody working on something that is focused more on tempos. And then I might have someone else who is focused more on their ability to stabilize as they go through that movement, or they're focused more on, you know, basically the setup as it pertains to going out onto the field. And so, you know, it's giving them that autonomy and saying, listen, here's the intent of the exercise. If you don't understand the intent, you need to let me know, but I have 4 other programs that I'm managing at the same time. And I will say that our athletes are very, very good at coaching each other. And that's one thing that I love, is they feel confident enough at this point to say, okay, not only do I feel like I can do this myself, but I can teach somebody else how to do this. And that's what I need. I need more generals on the floor. You know, I can't be the only one doing everything, because I am the only coach in there. There is no assistant coach. Up until this point, we have not had any interns. And so, you know, there have been times where I've got the football group, the lacrosse team, and track athletes in there all at once. And so I've got to be able to manage all those groups, manage all those different programs, but without giving one-on-one attention to everybody.
Now, you've obviously got the green, the white, and the black, which helps you kind of give the athletes or group the athletes within their skill level within the weight room. How do you handle or manage that the programs, you know, between sports? So say, do you group them, say, like fall, winter, spring sports, or do you kind of each team has their own program? And then I guess, I don't know, I can't remember how big Newman was, but with your kids that are multi-sport athletes, how might that change some of your programming with them?
Sure. So every team has their own program that they're going to go through, but the carryover between teams is very similar. You know, we're going to use a lot of the same exercises. Like I said, you know, we're going to focus on our ability to squat, hinge, push, pull, rotate, carry. And so it's just a difference within each sport, where they're at within their season, where they're at within their year, and what they're able to do as they go through that. And so, you know, you can go into the weight room at any point during the year, and you're going to see similar exercises between all sports. So as it pertains to, you know, how it's set up, so we begin school on Thursday. I will have just my fall teams for 2 weeks. After Labor Day, all of my winter teams will join. Now, what I try to do, and Newman has a very different type of schedule. The way that it's set up, all the athletes have at least one free period during the day where they can do whatever they want with it, whether it's use it as a study hall or come in and get a workout. What I do is I encourage my in-season athletes to work out during the day so that I can handle just the off-season athletes after school. So that helps me manage it a little bit more. But the way that we've got it set up, you know, when they come in there, they know exactly what they're supposed to do from a warm-up standpoint. They know where they're supposed to go to in order to get the workout, and how we set up in order to move throughout the facility. But you're going to see, from a programming standpoint, you're going to see a lot of carryover from sport to sport when it comes to exercise selection and prescription.
Okay. That's big. I think so many coaches want that, like, you know, like baseball coaches. Oh, I don't want my kids bench pressing because they heard, you know, whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that these coaches realize that so many of these kids don't have the basics, and they're not doing. I mean, doing a little bench press is probably not going to hurt them. Probably help them just because they don't have a base level of strength. And if they're playing base, and if they're playing football, you know, I mean, it's like, you know, coaches get so stuck in the sport specific, you know, and don't really look at the global picture of developing the athlete as a whole. So I think that.
So yeah, so when it comes to the multi-sport athlete, I'm somebody who believes that you can really only peak one time a year. And so you might be able to do it twice a year, but I don't think high school athletes are able to do it. And I don't know how many high school athletes actually peak anyway. They're going through such a growth and through such a developmental stage that I don't even know that is really possible for them. They would have to be training extremely hard in order to get there. But what we're going to do is we're going to see a ton of overlap, like I said, between the exercises. But what I try to do is explain to my coaches, listen, here's what we're doing now that pertains specifically to you and to this sport. And here's how I'm going to adjust it or change it in order to change for that next sport. And so, if I have a guy who is a football, basketball, baseball player, then we are, as a school, you gave the example of bench press. As a school, I really don't do a whole lot of bench pressing. And my athletes hate me for it, but when bench press makes us faster, then we'll start bench pressing a whole lot more. But we have two kids who weigh more than 250. Like bench press is not going to help us get anywhere.
No.
So the movements that we're going to use are going to be able to carry over from sport to sport. I am going to implement movements that are specific to that sport. So, for our baseball guys, we're going to do a lot of rotational work. But when I talk to my basketball and my football coach, and they have guys that are coming out of baseball, I'm going to help explain to them, listen, this isn't a negative for your program. This is only going to help you guys out as well. One thing that we're going to spend a lot of time on is hip mobility. When we go into basketball season, we're going to spend a lot of time on ankle and thoracic mobility. And so explaining to the basketball coach how I'm adjusting the program in order to accommodate his athletes from that standpoint. So, we have a basic structure that a lot of our athletes are going to go through. It's the supplemental and it's the additional things that we add in on top of that basically makes it specific to that sport. And so, that's how I would term it sport specific is the additional things that we add on top of the program itself.
Yeah. And I think it kind of sounds like you run it like the word that I love that I've kind of taken is that idea of a unified program that I think Coach Schofield uses. It's not, everybody, you're working to just create the total athlete, especially with the kids that you've got multiple sports. And it's just a total athletic development versus exactly like you're only a baseball player, that kind of thing is just creating a total athlete versus just a specific kid, especially for these kids
right.
Who hardly can't even move or can't even squat, or lunge. They don't need a sport specific program. They need that development across the board, across the spectrum.
Right.
So, I think.
Well, and you and I we see the studies every year of these guys that are drafted. By the NBA, by the NFL, the guys that go on to the national championship and college football, and we see the studies of the sports that they played in high school. And I think the percentage is the same every year. Of those individuals that are drafted and go on to play at the highest level, almost 90% of them play multiple sports. So, there are very few sport-specific guys that end up getting to that final level, to that top tier of athletics. And so, we know that having a well-rounded general athlete is much better than having someone who's specific, who more than likely is probably going to get injured because they are so specific and they are so overdeveloped in a certain area. And so it becomes that much more important for us to be able to develop the whole athlete. And like I talk to my athletes all the time, you are a toolbox. We are giving you the tools to use as an athlete. We're giving you the ability to rotate. We are giving you the ability to, from a movement standpoint, accelerate and decelerate. From an agility standpoint, be able to accelerate in different movement patterns, whether we're taking directional steps, crossover steps, hip rotations into some type of stepping pattern. And so giving them all of these different tools to use, and then they can decide when competition comes around what they want to do the most of or what they feel is most beneficial to them. And I think it's the same way in the weight room. We're going to give them all of these different movements. And I have guys come in all the time that want to do extra work. And when they do that extra work, they have the ability to do what they want. And we know that we're naturally going to go to the movements we feel most confident with and the movements that we think are going to make us better. And so, I never worry about that. I know that they're going to get the extra work done in the areas that they think is going to take them to the next level. I have to give them that solid foundation and be able to expose them to multiple different things.
Yeah, I think, like you said, it's giving them what they haven't gotten, especially in the weight room, because they're just doing the same thing over and over. Giving them what they haven't gotten is going to make them more robust, make them more resilient, and you're not just pounding on the same movement patterns all day long.
Right.
It's like basketball players, they they jump all the time.
Right.
But do they do the strength part of things, and those kind of deals. So now you started talking about speed, and we'll kind of transition to that. Obviously, you have a history in track and field. How did that help you as a coach, being a track athlete, and going through that process of being coached every day and taught every day, the technique of running and that kind of thing with your athletes?
Yeah, so it kind of helped me from a couple of different perspectives. So the first perspective is I learned very hands-on. I learned by watching. I learned by listening. I had four other individuals who were part of my relay team and who were part of so I was a sprinter, 200, 400 runner, who were part of my group. And they were by far better athletes than I was. I mean, I was, the only reason I was good was because of them. And so I had the ability to watch them day in and day out and watch their habits. And I feel like I'm a pretty, I'm pretty good at observing things and watching different habits and seeing how it pertains to athletic movement. And even at that point, I was watching them, watching how they would warm up, how they would cool down, what their mindset was, what they would do on the track, from a running technique and mechanics standpoint. That's how I learned a lot of the things that I did learn. Is I knew that when I ran, I did not look like them, and I knew that I was not as fast as them. And so it only made sense to me that I needed to look more like them in order to be fast. So that was the foundation of my learning. And then from there, obviously I had a great sprint coach who taught me a lot of the things that I use even today. And then from there, it was trial and error. Even after college, I continued to compete. There were 3 years after my collegiate experience was over that I was continuing to travel around the country competing. And it wasn't necessarily because I was trying to make a living running track, but I was still learning. I didn't start running track to my senior year of high school. And so I was only 5 years in at the point that I graduated. And so I still had a passion for the sport. I was still developing. And so that was when I really started to learn things on my own, because at that point I didn't have a strength coach. I didn't have a sprint coach who was with me at all times. And so, I was trying to write my own programs, develop my own systems, and that's where I started to learn, okay, this works for me and this doesn't work for me. But I think it also helps from the standpoint of I knew where my athletes were as they were going through the workouts. I had a young coach ask me a number of years ago. He said, "Well, how do you program work to rest ratio when you are doing sprint work? Is it 1-to-1 or 1-to-2?" I was like, "It's not even close. For every 10 to 20 yards that you're sprinting, you better give them at least a minute rest." I hate going out to the track and seeing sprint coaches that say, "Okay, we're going to run 400 meters, and then you get 30 seconds off, and we're going to run 400 meters." Well, that's not a sprint workout at all. That's a workout in survival. And so, just that ability to say, okay, I know what you guys are feeling, and I know what we want to get out of this workout. And when I was in Indy, I was a track coach for 3 years. And one of the things that I would say to my captains is, okay, you guys need to let me know where we're at throughout this workout. Is it too hard? Is it too easy? Are we hitting our times, not hitting our times? Do you guys feel like you're prepared as the season goes on? And so, constantly relying on the feedback of my athletes to tell me this is where we're at right now, and understanding myself, okay, I remember what that felt like. Here's the change we need to make in order to be where I want to be.
That definitely sets you ahead in terms of, a lot of other people is having that background.
Right.
And having it's kind of that idea of, I don't usually do anything that I haven't ever done before,
Yes.
because you can't feel it. You can't tell them how it's supposed to feel, or where you're going to feel it, or where you're going to feel this, or, where you
Right.
should be hitting the ground when you run, those kind of things. And I guess then for me, this is something that I'm not necessarily very good at. I mean, I'm a 6'7", 260-pound guy. I was never a track guy. So speed was never my forte. But now I'm starting to see that is, listening to guys like yourself, and Hunter, Chernuski,
Hmm.
and this, how speed can be such a developer, not just of sports specific, but even in the weight room, and making this kid stronger just from sprinting, because there's so much force in
Right.
the ground. So this has been something I've really been trying to get into. Um, what are the two, maybe three cues that you would use for a beginner, maybe one of your freshmen that are coming in running, and you're just trying to get them, hey, I'll give you these three cues, and let's see if you can, to make it look semi like a sprinter. I know that
Right.
there's a difference between sports speed and then track speed, but
Right.
to get them in the right positions, to
Right.
make them
Yeah.
successful.
Yeah. So from a cueing standpoint, the actual instruction and words that I'm going to give, I like to use cues that create some type of mental image, that create some type of picture. And so a couple of the cues that I use a lot are things like pop, push, smash, up, rip, things that are sharp, that I can say quickly, and that give them that mental image. So when I introduce those, I try to give them the image. So when I say pop, I try to explain to them, think about, popcorn in a pan. When it starts to pop, its ability to get off the ground quickly. That's what I want out of your steps. When we hit the ground and come back up, it needs to be that popping motion. When I use a term like smash, I explain to the athletes, listen, when we go into that knee lift, or we drive our knee up, I want you to pretend like I've got a pane of glass over your knee. I want you to smash through that pane of glass. And so throughout that acceleration, throughout that run, that's what I want to be, the image within their mind's eye is, they're smashing through that glass with every step. And so being able to create that picture for them so they understand what I'm looking for. Now, a couple of the things that I think are very important when it comes to sprinting and the ability to accelerate quickly. So there was an article that I just posted about today, the importance of posture and positioning in sprinting, and that talks about some of the same things. But obviously, the first thing is our posture. Our ability to stay flat, to be long and strong, or long and straight, and then the forces that we create. And that's one thing that, again, I feel like our athletes are very intelligent. Especially our high school athletes are very intelligent that we're working with. And so I try and relate as much as I can to what they're actually going through. And so when we talk about forces and we talk about vectors, I'm explaining it to them, and we're drawing pictures and we're putting it up on the board. And I'm saying, listen, when your foot lands here, this is what happens to your body. The time, then it adjusts what's happening. And so, just being able to teach them and help them understand how that has an effect on them. And then basically from there, so, we talk about our posture, we talk about how we get into that position, and then we basically talk about, how we make that transition, what's going to happen to us as we accelerate. Obviously, we're not going to stay in the same position the entire time. Something has to change, and our environment is going to have an effect on us. And so as our environment has that effect on us, what do we need to do in order to adjust to accommodate that?
Awesome. Awesome. That good stuff there. Um, Now, how do you structure your sessions, say either individual or with your high school teams, um, both within the day? How do you break down the session itself within athletic movement, and then within the week? how are you kind of programming throughout the week, whether it's linear, lateral movement, crossover step, like how are you breaking that down for your guys, for the
Right,
girls?
right. So, again, I've got a resource that I feel like helps with this. If you go to my YouTube channel, there is a presentation that I gave for the Southwest Regional Conference where I talk about our program design from a speed standpoint in the group setting. And so the way that session is set up, obviously we're going to go through our tissue preparation. Then we're going to go through whatever our dynamic warm-up is. I'm going to have specific mobility drills that we're going to go through that, one, are specific to the team, but also are specific to the drill that we're going through that day. Then we're going to go into whatever our plyometrics are. And so, I do a lot of hopping, whether it's jump rope or line hops or box hops. We do a lot of ankle dominant hopping exercises because one thing that, our body loves tension. It does not, one thing that I think it's Franz Bosch talks about is muscle slack. You cannot have muscle slack if you're going to go through high velocity movements. And so we are constantly training the ankle complex in order to be able to release that slack quickly and find that tension. And so, we'll go through whatever our hopping exercises are for the day. We'll go through whatever our lower limb dominant exercise is for that day, whether we're trying to focus on some type of vertical or horizontal force. And then we're going to go into what I term as our movement primers. And so our movement primers, again, are going to be specific to the drill that we're doing. So if it is an acceleration-based day, then we're going to focus on things like wall sprints, sled marches, our A series, march, skip, runs. Then we're going to move into basically what our speed work is for that day. And even within the speed work, it has a progression itself. So everything that we're going to do is going to be from a top-down approach. We're all going to start tall, and we're going to work down into the position that we're focused on for that day. We're going to work slow to fast. I'm constantly giving my athletes percentages. And not that they know what percentage that they're at, but just trying to help them understand, listen, right now we're not going fast. And on the next rep, we're going to go a little faster. And the rep after that, we're going to go a lot faster. And then the rep after that, you're going to give me everything that you have. And so trying to help them understand that we're working up into this. And then also progressing from soft to hard from an acceleration standpoint. We are not coming in cold. We're not necessarily ready to be extremely explosive off the line. And so, we're going to do walk-in starts. We're going to do jog-in starts. We're going to do form running drills into our accelerations. And then we can do some hard starts from a static position. But everything that we do is going to be progressive, basically from the point that we walk in the doors to the fitness center to the point where we're actually sprinting.
It's good stuff, man. I didn't know that apparently there was a time limit on this thing because it just popped up at the top. So we've reached kind of the end. But that was great stuff.
Good.
Where can people find you? Obviously, you've got this Instagram account. Anything else you may have? We got about a minute left.
Yeah, so best place to find me, BrattonSportsPerformance.com. I have this Instagram account, Brattain Sports Perf. I also have Newman High Performance, where you can find a lot of our information, and I have my YouTube channel. And so I'm constantly trying to post stuff on that on a daily basis.
Awesome. I'm definitely going to check out the YouTube. I've obviously seen your website and Instagram and everything,
Sure.
But definitely try to pick some stuff up off of there. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. Spending about an hour or so on your Sunday. And sadly, I couldn't get what's your best restaurant. If you got one restaurant in New Orleans, go.
Either Praline Connection or Praline Connection or Superior Seafood. Those are frequented by me.
My favorite, I didn't get it till we were about to leave, was Katie's. The basketball coach was big about it. So, but
yeah.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, and you have a good afternoon,
Absolutely.
man. All right, brother.
Yeah, you too. A lot of fun. Thanks.
Take care.